It was one of those relentless, heavy rains that saturates the world, making everything look murky and surreal. I was 17, far too young to comprehend the true depth of fear, the kind of fear that clings to your bones long after the danger is gone. The sky was a dark slate, clouds swollen with the threat of another downpour, and the air had that distinct, cold bite that seeped through my old jacket as I drove my rusted-out car along the narrow, winding road into town. I lived on the outskirts of a town so small it barely existed on maps. It was the kind of place where doors stayed unlocked at night, and neighbors greeted each other by name. Back then, the idea of danger was distant, an abstraction, not something I felt could ever touch me. I'd been driving alone for about half an hour, with the rhythmic sound of windshield wipers battling the rain, when I saw her. She was standing on the side of the road, soaked to the bone, her long dark hair clinging to her face, hitchhiking with a slow, deliberate motion, her thumb pointed toward the direction of town. She looked about my age, maybe a little older, and in that moment, something in me, a mix of boredom, curiosity, or maybe just plain naivety, decided to pull over. I rolled down the passenger window just enough for her to peer inside. She had striking eyes, the kind that seemed to pierce right through you, and though she was drenched, there was something unsettlingly calm about her. She didn't smile or say anything at first, just stared, as if measuring me, before asking softly, "Town?" I nodded, and she slid into the passenger seat, water pooling around her feet as she shut the door with a soft thud. I figured she must have been freezing, but she didn't seem to care. Her face was expressionless, almost blank, save for those eyes. They flicked over to me, and for the briefest moment, I felt something, a cold shiver that ran down my spine, though I quickly dismissed it. We didn't talk much. In fact, she didn't seem interested in conversation at all. Instead, we drove in silence, the rain pounding against the windows like a constant, uneasy reminder of how isolated we were out there. After a few miles, I tried to break the silence, asking where she was from or where she was heading, but she only responded with short, almost cryptic answers. I stopped trying after that. There was something about her, something I couldn't put my finger on, something unsettling. But again, I pushed it aside. I was young, stupid, and didn't know better. We continued on like that, the quiet hanging thick between us as we listened to the static-filled music humming from the car's ancient radio. About 45 minutes passed, and we finally reached the outskirts of town. She asked me to pull over at a gas station just off the main road, her voice quiet but firm. I figured she wanted to use the payphone or something, so I complied. As soon as the car rolled to a stop, I saw her move in my peripheral vision, a shift in the dim, rainy light. Before I could react, she reached into her backpack and, with an unsettling calmness, pulled out the largest knife I had ever seen. It gleamed, despite the gloom, long and sharp, catching the faint flicker of the gas station's neon sign as she casually placed it on her thigh, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of the blade. The air inside the car seemed to thicken, my breath catching in my throat. For a moment, time itself seemed to slow. The world outside vanished, swallowed by the rain and the dark, leaving only her and the knife between us. My heart pounded so violently in my chest I thought it might explode, but I couldn't move, I couldn't even blink. Then, she turned those cold, piercing eyes toward me, her lips curling into a twisted half-smile. "I was going to kill you," she said, her voice steady and chilling, "and take your car." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. My mind raced, trying to process what she was saying, the magnitude of it, but before I could even begin to react, she continued, her voice softening just slightly, almost as if amused by my terror. "But," she added, leaning just a little closer, "you're a sweet kid." She tilted her head, studying me with that unnerving calmness, like I was some kind of puzzle she'd figured out. "Don't ever pick up hitchhikers again." And then, as if nothing had happened, she opened the door and stepped out into the rain, walking away without a backward glance, her figure soon swallowed by the storm. For what felt like an eternity, I sat there, frozen, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. The knife, the cold edge of her words, her eyes, everything about that moment clung to me like a second skin. I was paralyzed by the realization of just how close I'd come to what? Death? Something worse? I eventually gathered the strength to drive away, my entire body trembling. I didn't go into town that night. Instead, I drove straight home, locking every door and window as soon as I got inside. I stayed up all night, replaying the encounter in my mind, feeling the ghost of that blade in the air between us, hearing her voice over and over. That night changed something in me. It was as if she had peeled back a layer of the world I hadn't known existed, a darker, colder layer where people like her lived, moving through the shadows. And from that day forward, I carried a weight with me, a knowledge that the world was far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. I've never picked up another hitchhiker since. Not once. And to this day, every time it rains, I feel her presence again, lurking just on the edge of my memory, reminding me of how easily fate can turn on you, how close I came to disappearing into the dark forever.